Yeah, man, this is where the party at?
Oh yes, I'm a sneaky thief, me. I'll loot your valuables, I'll spy on you, I'll sniff your panties. I'll uncover all your darkest secrets because I'm a dirty, smelly fucking thief.
There's one thing this city's taught me. You can put a price on anything. Secrets, reputations, a life. And trust? If you have to ask, you can't afford it. But then I suppose none of that matters when you're me. After all, when did I ever pay for anything?
Before I get stuck into this review, I just want to make a disclaimer and say that I have never played a Thief game, ever. I remember seeing the games on the shelves at PC World, for example, when I was a kid, and they did look very intriguing. But around that time, I was getting stuck into the likes of Half-Life, Counter-Strike and Age of Empires, as well as a lot of indie games at the time. And those were some good times. But alas, I just never got around to playing any of the Thief games. I know they're quite revered by the fans, and I'm more than aware that this game, the Reboot, never really came close to what those games offered, just by looking at lots of reviews online. So I thought I'd just mention that first, so you know, I'm not one of those hardcore fans of the series. Anyway, let's jump into the reviews. Guys, I'll be honest, I'm still struggling with this game's story. I've been reading the documents, I've been watching the cutscenes, I've been listening to the NPCs, but I'm still trying to work out and understand what I just went through. I understand bits of it, and there are some cool moments in there. It's not that it's hard to follow like some David Lynch film, it's just that it's not told very well. There's not much coherency, and to be utterly honest, it is a poor story. As far as captivating me, holding my interest and instilling information into my brain, the game just doesn't do enough to warrant my interest. There are moments where things pick up, as I say, but for the most part, you'll be more concerned with the gameplay itself, which is the main reason you should play this game. But I'll get to that. What I do know from memory, and without looking online, is that you play a very talented thief called Garrett. He's the best at what he does. He's careful, methodical, and aware. He's currently on a thieving expedition with his apprentice, or friend, or sister, whoever this woman is at the beginning of the game. She's young, brash, and eager to impress, which ultimately leads to her supposed death. And without spoiling too much, it's up to you to find out what happened to her and why. Now there's a few things going on at the same time. For example, you've got this plague going about called the Gloom. It's killing people left, right and centre throughout the city. Everyone's worried about it. You hear people talking about how tired they are, wondering if they've caught the gloom, fearing the worst for their health. Sounds pretty much like myself whenever I catch a simple cold. There's a lockdown in place, so it's quite fitting for the current reality we all share right now. You've got a couple of bad eggs in the game for you to meet, confront and interact with, to a certain degree. I couldn't tell you their names offhand because, well, quite frankly, I just didn't care enough about them to take it in. They are widely forgettable characters in this game, not just these bad eggs, you know. There's no real depth, intrigue or originality going on, and that goes for all of the optional side quest givers in the game as well, which is a bit of a shame. The only interesting character in the game I found was Garrett, and that's probably because you spend the most amount of time with him. But it's also probably to do with his stature, his mystique. You know, we don't really know his backstory. There's a lot of blanks, which probably works to the character's favour. You know, he looks cool, he sounds good. You know, obviously he's got a lot of skill to his craft, you know, for you to discover as you play. So he's this game's biggest, best character for sure, in my opinion. So you should be playing this game for the gameplay itself, if you haven't already. 100%, it's the game's best draw, and it does a lot of things reasonably well. Your main weapon is your bow, and a selection of interesting types of arrows you can use depending on the situation at hand. So you've got your broadhead arrows, which are your standard arrows. You've got your sawtooth arrows, which are more damaging. You've got blast arrows for crowd control.
You remember that? He marked my forehead with it, left to right, and bang.
And you've got these water arrows, which from afar, for example, you can extinguish flames and create yourself some more cover and shadow, which I really enjoyed. You've got different methods of getting to your objective as well, and you've got these blunt arrows for activating switches and mechanisms, so you don't waste your lethal arrows on these. You've got rope arrows for traversing high areas, and you've got this tool set such as your screwdrivers for penetrating through vents, and you've also got the wire cutters for disabling traps as well. Here's a free tip: if you've not played this game yet, get the wire cutters as early as you can. You will need them. And you've got a big ass city to get to know as well. Reasonably interesting locations for you to break into and explore. Lots of houses to invade, loot, and sometimes learn about some of the inhabitants via overheard conversations or documents which act as some of the collectibles in the game. Coincidentally, there's lots of things to collect in Thief. There's these documents I mentioned. You've also got special loot to add to your collection in your hideout, which, you know, it's a very passive aspect in the game, I found. I just didn't care that it was there, and I didn't really bother with it. So it's just there, to be fair. It's just to kind of make you feel a bit more like Garrett, I think, but it's very passive, as I say. But there is a snag when it comes to exploring the city and getting from one end to the other. The fucking loading screens. The amount of times you'll see the same gap to squeeze through, for example. Lifting the same wooden block every time will get dull very quickly, and it does break the immersion in the game. You'll also be opening the same copy and pasted windows the same way throughout the game countless times, and without warning the game will say, "Oh, hang about, this window's a gateway to another part of the city. Wait 15 seconds while I load it up." Again, you've got to understand that this will be a common occurrence for much of the game, especially when you're looking at completing the side objectives, let alone getting to the game's next chapter. So you've got 3 ways to play this game. You've got stealth, aggressive, or somewhere in between, depending on your confidence, intelligence, familiarity, and preference. And you get marked at the end of each chapter or side mission with what method you chose to follow and which set of challenges you completed. So there's no set way to play except if you're looking at obtaining all of the trophies or achievements in the game, of course. Now, I was playing proper stealthy for the first handful of hours in this game, and I was loving it. I was being extra cautious around guards. I was making sure no one saw me in their houses. I was looking around for secret areas to exploit. I genuinely felt like a real ninja thief. But once I figured out how the crappy AI worked, and the AI is shit in this game, guys. It's so predictable and laughably exploitable. It broke the game for me. The enemy AI is one of the worst things about this game. Like, if you're playing aggressively, killing most threats around you, for example, save for one guy, he'll look for you, and then after about 30 seconds, he'll get back to his post. Well, his dead mates are still littered all around him. He'll just give up and return to his post. You know, this game came out in 2014, the same year as Alien Isolation, Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, and Far Cry 4. You know, but yeah, it's predictable AI. The enemies have set routes for you to observe and take advantage of. They never deviate from their positions except if they see you. Like, if you're going through with stealth in mind and you're spotted, you may as well do what most games these days allow you to do because of its everyone's a winner mentality to make the game more accessible for everyone, you know? And that's hit pause and restart your last save. Because not only is fighting in this game utterly pointless, and that I like about the game, by the way, you're not a big burly guy, you know, your main talent is being a sneaky fucker. So I like that one-on-one combat or two-on-one combat is not your character's forte, but it doesn't serve when you could just save pretty much any time during the game. You know, that takes away a lot of the threat. You could try this technique or that method to your heart's content, and the game doesn't mind that you do that. It's very safe. You know, you could just save the game anywhere you want and go, I wonder if this works. If that doesn't pan out, you could just restart your save again from like 10 seconds ago. You know, I can understand that when you're exploring the city, but when you're in missions, you know, especially when there's challenges involved, I feel like they should take that off. So with all that in mind, you don't really ever feel like you're accomplishing anything, but rather taking advantage of the AI's lack of intelligence and the game's forgiving nature. So after realising this, back to the point, after realising this, and that wasn't too far along into the game, you know, I started the game with the best intentions, as I say. I want to get in and out without anyone ever knowing I was there. And I did this for the first few chapters. But after the utter predictable nature of the AI, I couldn't help but just feel like, oh, this shit. So in the end, do you know what I was doing? For the majority of the game anyway, I'd say about 60% throughout the game, I just decided I'd make the game more interesting and start killing people. You know, I'd take them out at a distance, throw some bottles at their heads. That's pretty fun. And it did make the game far more enjoyable for me. When you are doing your stealth run though, you know, before you come to realise any of this, you've You've got competent stealth mechanics at your disposal, and these are really well received. You can extinguish candlelight for more cover of darkness, for example. You've got this swoop mechanic, which is really cool. It allows you to traverse the environment faster without really making much noise, getting from one dark area to another. It also comes in handy when, for example, you're pickpocketing people, which is really satisfying. You can peek around corners to check out the area while concealing yourself. You can look through keyholes, lockpick doors, chests and cupboards, which not only makes sense in this type of game, but brings more variety as well. There's plenty of looting, and it's genuinely satisfying looting as well. There's lots of shit for you to take, and there's just something about checking all the drawers, wondering what's going to be in there. You know, it's very, very juicy. There's some puzzle solving for you to do in the form of getting combinations to safes, following directions from some of the documents you'll find and the like. So, with all this being said, you do feel like a thief in this regard. It's done quite well, and it never really got old for me. Now, there's 8 chapters in the game, which I found to be just perfect. That was the sweet spot right there. These range from infiltrating a whorehouse, which I very much enjoy, to be honest. There's a few boobies in the game, and some naughtiness to witness while you're peering through spy holes. And then there's another chapter where you infiltrate an insane asylum. There's noises going on all around you, there's shadows in the background and figures walking around corners, that kind of thing. I thought these 2 examples were the best chapters in my opinion. I just appreciated the variety, and the game does surprise you in places, which I really liked.
You shouldn't be here.
As I mentioned earlier, you have a fair amount of side objectives for you to take up, and that will ultimately add to your currency, which you use to buy stuff like food, ammunition, and upgrades for your gear. And you buy these from very naff, uninspired merchants around the city. And there's about 2 of these darted around the whole city. You have your main merchant who gives you the most items, but then there's this lesser poor man's merchant who, you know, you can only buy a certain amount of items from. And then there's a sense of progressiveness as you play the game as well. For example, when you complete a main objective, your playground will start to evolve a little to reflect the story's progression. Less or more people posted, buildings on fire, people getting hanged, more people on the streets, that kind of thing. Now, in terms of the graphics, they ain't bad. You know, it's detailed to the point you can believe you're actually there in the city, you know, or wherever the story will take you. You've got good shadow effects, which, you know, comes in handy for this type of game. There's a great use of lighting in the game as well. Actually, speaking of lighting, there are times in the game where there'll be a storm, and now and again the lightning will strike, and when it does, you'll be completely exposed for like a second or 2. I really like that. I thought that made for some great tense situations in the game. But there are a lot of dull areas in the game. It's not game breaking or anything. A lot of this game takes place at night, which makes sense, right? But in doing so, it does feel like there's little variety. I would love to try and get into areas while it's broad daylight outside, you know? I understand, you know, a thief like Garrett may work better in the dark, but it would have been not only more of a challenge, but, you know, it would have spiced up the game a little bit. The worst aspect of the graphics have to be how choppy they are. I'm not asking for 60 frames per second here. I'm really talking about the cutscenes. They honestly run at about 9 frames per second. I'm not joking. And because of that, there'll be lots of unsynchronized storytelling. Something will happen, and because of the sheer choppiness, the audio will lag behind the actual on-screen action by like a second or so. It's not a big deal, you know, I kind of lived with it, but when you're playing a game released in 2014, I honestly expect better. Now let me talk about the sound. The sound is the game's worst aspect, in my opinion. Honestly, it's shit, for the most part. I'm not going to talk about the game's music because, quite frankly, there's nothing really there to talk about. It's got music, there's nothing there that strikes a chord with you, it's there for filler, and that's it. So I'm just going to talk about the sound aspect. Now don't get me wrong, when you walk on glass, for example, you'll hear the glass crunching beneath your feet. When you fire your bow, you do so with quiet precision. What I'm talking about is the fucking repetitiveness of the NPC dialogue. Oh my god! Look, I mentioned earlier that I went through the first handful of hours of the game with stealth tactics in mind. That all nearly went out the window in the first couple of hours because I kept hearing the same bloody dialogue repeating over and over and over and over again. And not only that, but it's not uncommon. to hear a single NPC start their shitty dialogue, which, as an example, will take about 5 seconds to speak or so, but just after they've begun talking, they'll repeat the whole thing all over again and start talking over themselves. You know, if someone says, "It'd be good to see my wife again. I haven't seen her in months. I wonder if she still misses me." You'll hear it sometimes as, "It'd be good to see my wife again. I haven't seen her in months. I wonder if she still misses me. And no joke, that nearly caused me to just say "fuck it," genuinely, and take the guy out so I don't have to keep listening to it anymore. It's terrible, guys. It's that terrible it made me want to throw away my playstyle out the window. Did this game get through quality control? Because I really don't understand. At the end of the day, you know, to round up, whilst playing this game for the majority, I was genuinely considering giving it a decent 7 out of 10 score. The game's best feature, like I say, is the gameplay itself, and that's the most important aspect in any game, period. But I just can't justify giving this game a 7 out of 10, because as decent as the gameplay is throughout the game, when it comes to the graphics, it falls short. When it comes to the bloody sound, it definitely falls short. And when it comes to the story, you know, you're not going to remember this in years to come. You know, you're not going to look back on Thief and think, "Oh yeah, man, I remember that segment. That was absolutely fantastic." There are other games out there that do a far better job in the story department, as well as gameplay, sound, and graphics as well. So do you need to play this game? No, you don't. So to round this all up, I'm going to give this game a 6 out of 10. And to be honest, I think that's a pretty fair score. Now, if you enjoyed this review, I would ask you kindly to please hit the thumbs up button. That would help the channel out greatly. I do appreciate it when everyone does that. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. There's more content like this coming out in the future. And please, if you have any comments on this particular review, or if you've got any comments about Thief, the game, the 2014 reboot in general, please sound off down below. That's what the comments are for. So thank you very much for watching this review, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all on the next video.